Thank you guys for coming tonight for what is our last meeting for the transition from the old Revive 285 project to what we're moving forward with an express lane project on 285 on the 285 corridor. So what we're going to talk about tonight is the history and growth of 285. Talk about what's happened over what honestly is the last 50 years, because this is the 50th anniversary of the 285 corridor when it was first built and open to traffic. And we'll talk about the Revive 285 project, what we did with that project, what we studied, what came out of that project, and then talk about the notice of intent process that we started with that project, which is a federally mandated process, and we have to formally bring that to a close and then start a new notice of intent or NOI process for the new project. So that's what the purpose of this meeting is, and I'll go over the details surrounding that. We'll talk about MMIP at a high level, really just to remind everyone what the projects are in the program. We'll talk about express lane benefits, what we're finding with benefits, and as we open express lanes, we've got some statistics on the Northwest Corridor Express Lane project in Cobb and Cherokee County that we'll share with you. And then we'll talk about, just show you what the limits and what we're proposing on I-285 Top End Corridor or North Side Corridor between Cobb and DeKalb County, and also up State Route 400. And we'll talk more importantly about the next steps, where we're at with the project today, where we're headed down the line when it comes to where you're going to have an opportunity to see the layouts and offer those comments and feedback that we need so we can make some good decisions on the project. So as I mentioned earlier, there's I-285 corridor dates back 50 years this year, actually. Back in the 1960s, that roadway opened up with 2 lanes on it. As we move forward in time, in the 1980s, we experienced over 200% growth in the metro area and in this corridor alone, which forced us to look at solving some congestion issues that we were seeing on that roadway based on that population growth. In 1989, we widened 285 from 2 to 4 lanes in each direction to help hopefully solve some of that congestion that occurred in that time period. In 1996, obviously with the Olympics coming to Atlanta, that forced even more population growth in the corridor and along that region. So we added another lane on 285 in that corridor. And what we were finding as we started to add lanes, we kept getting congestion no matter how many lanes we added to the roadway. So what we found was, as the congestion got worse, people were getting off the expressway and going on the side streets. The path of least resistance is what we're calling it. They're finding, like water, right? I'm going to go where I need to go to get to where I need to be. So that's what we were seeing. And every time we'd widen 285, they'd get off the side roads and get in the empty lane until it filled up again. And then they would continue that trend over and over and over again. So what we're seeing as we look to manage transportation problems or congestion problems on our most congested corridors, that widening the roadway is not the answer necessarily. Now, widening a roadway in other parts of the state may be the right answer. It just depends. But in the most congested corridors of 285, 400, 75, and 85, we just find that it's not the right answer. So as we move forward in time, we've got to look for some solutions, because widening's not the way to go. So in 2000, we looked at our HOV system plan. Do we need to add HOV lanes to the I-285 corridor? Will that help solve some congestion problem? During that study, they found that, guys, we don't think enough people are going to get out of their cars and carpool to make a difference. It's really not going to move the needle when it comes to solving that problem on that corridor. So we kind of shifted gears in 2006 and said, okay, well, let's holistically look at 285 corridor and figure out how we can revive that corridor. And we called it Revive 285 Project. And as a part of that project, we were studying many alternatives, not just widening a roadway. So at that time, we issued a notice of intent to start the environmental process so that we can move forward to study that project as a whole. So that's what happened in 2006. That project continued its study from 2006 to 2013, where ultimately it met its demise because of lots of reasons, and I'll show you what that is. In that same time period of after we started the Revive Corridor project, we also looked at, in 2009, our managed lane system plan. And that's what we call express lanes or managed lanes. So we said, well, let's look at a plan to maybe add express lanes. Is that the right answer? So we updated that plan and moved forward while continuing to study the corridor of 285 in Revive. In 2012 and continuing on to 2020, there was a lot of operational improvements that were studied in the Revive project as well, and I'll show you what became of those. And now as we move forward on into the future, we're headed toward express lanes as that solution. So that's really giving you a history of the I-285 corridor, the trends that we've seen from a population growth perspective, and some of the solutions we've tried to bring to the table to help manage that, but really didn't pan out. But I'll show you some great things that did come out of the Revive project. But before I do that, continuing with the growth message on this corridor, I won't read all the statistics here. You can see them for yourselves. Most of you live in this area or work in this area. You know exactly what kind of growth has happened. A lot of Fortune 500 companies are moving into this region, into this area in particular, with Mercedes-Benz, the most recent, and they've opened their doors over there. So with bringing all this Fortune 500 companies to the table is a great thing for our region. It sparks economic development, economic growth, and it's a really good thing. But when you do that, you also bring more traffic to the table. So as we recognize these things are important, we've got to still try to solve the problem when it comes to mobility and congestion in our region. So the Revive 285 corridor, as I mentioned, we had to publish a notice of intent, or NOI, back in 2006, which kicked off the environmental process. Well, because we're bringing that project to a close and we're moving forward with a different project, although it's some things from that old project, we've got to start a new notice of intent. So later this summer, federally mandated process, we've got to rescind that NOI, and we're going to issue a new one in October for the other project. So that's really what the purpose of this meeting is, to try to help folks understand how we go from one mega project to a new project. So what was studied in the Revive 285 corridor? Hopefully you guys were familiar with the project if you've been around the area. We reached out and done a lot of public involvement as it relates to Revive 285. We looked at the transportation system management plan within the corridor. What do we need? How do we manage the project outside of just widening the roadway? We also looked at operational improvements on the Revive 285 project, and I'll show you what those are in just a minute. But we also looked at express lanes. Is express lanes the right alternative in the Revive project? We looked at some transit options in that corridor as well as a part of that study. We looked at BRT, or bus rapid transit, as a potential option to solve the problem of congestion. We looked at expanding our express bus service that currently operates on these roadways today. And we also looked at light rail transit. We didn't have the capacity or funding to actually build any type of light rail system or heavy rail system, but we said, what if we just preserve a right-of-way corridor or buy right-of-way to preserve a future effort if someone wanted to bring a light rail system to that corridor? So we studied that as well. At the end of the day, that project happened to start right before the economic downturn in 2007, and that trend continued all the way to 2013 until the project really just lost its momentum, did not have the money behind it, did not have the momentum to move forward. However, we did have some funds to bring some key operational improvement projects that was studied out of that Revive project. Most notably is the Ashford-Dunwoody DDI, or Diverging Diamond Interchange. That project is open to traffic there and is quite successful. I remember going to the mall up there, and there's 3 or 4 cops at any given intersection point before we put that project out there. There's still maybe a couple of cops out there today for any given reason, but it's not as bad as it was. So that's a pretty successful improvement. We also widened Roswell Road over 285 at the interchange there. There wasn't enough turn lane capacity or room to hold the cars that were trying to navigate to and from the interchange. So we widened and allowed more space for folks to get in the turn lanes to get through that interchange. So that works very nicely as well. We also added the Riverside Roundabout, Riverside Drive Roundabouts was an operational improvement project that was studied and brought from Revive, which is I think was our first roundabout interchange that was built in Georgia and is open to traffic today. Also on 75, Windy Hill, the Virgin Diamond project was studied, and we brought that and opened that traffic, I think, just about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. It was 2017. So that was open then and is a successful project. But one of the biggest operational improvement projects that was studied in the Revive corridor was the interchange at 285-400. We recognize that we can move the needle when it comes to safety and operations in that interchange by bringing that project forward and getting it open to traffic today. And that focuses on the interchange proper. That doesn't solve the problems from a regional perspective. You still have congestion to and from that interchange, north and south, east and west, but it does help the immediate interchange itself. So if you drive through that corridor today and the interchange of 400 and 285, you see a lot of construction going on, a lot of concrete coming out of the ground, if you will, a lot of beams being set. That project is well on its way to open to traffic. I think substantial completion the end of next year is when that's going to open up. So you'll see a big difference when it comes to that location when it, from a safety and operations perspective. But we still need to solve the problem beyond that point. So that's the purpose we're moving toward, to try to solve that problem. Moving into 2013, on the heels of that project kicking off, the Atlanta Regional Commission and the GDOT board said, guys, we can't widen our way out of traffic, and we can't keep widening the roadway because it's not working. So in our metro region, in our most congested corridors, our interstates of 285, 85, 75, and our state route, major state route of State Route 400, we are just not going to allow just widening a roadway. We need to manage traffic on these corridors. So they adopted managed lanes or express lanes as the best solution moving forward for those key corridors. Express lanes are not for everywhere. We recognize that. And the MMIP program does have other types of projects in it besides express lanes. But our key corridors that have the most congestion, that's what we're moving toward. In 2015, the state legislature passed the Transportation Funding Act, which brought an additional almost $1 billion to invest in our existing assets. How can we maintain what we have today? But that allow us, by bringing that additional money, allow us to take some other funds and move towards solving these congestion problems. And on the heels of that legislation, the governor announced the Major Mobility Investment Program, Governor Deal at the time, in 2016, and said, guys, we're going to move the needle when it comes to mobility and congestion. We believe this list of projects, and I'll show you what those are, will do that. Also in 2018, the state legislature passed some legislation that created the ATL, and that's what is a governance or a planning entity that's going to talk to all the counties that are in the ATL region and say, guys, we need to come up with a transit plan that's consistent with the region, consistent with our growth, and consistent with solving the problem of mobility and congestion. And oh, by the way, we're going to work with GDOT to try to figure out how we can integrate ourselves with the express lanes that they're building as well. So ATL is really that umbrella entity that's going to talk to MARTA, Gwinnett Bus Services, your Cobb County Link Services, Gwinnett Bus Service, and the local transit service providers alike. So they're going to come together and come up with that plan. Fulton County did a transit master plan in 2018 as well. They said, guys, what do we need to do from a county perspective to add transit? They voted, I bet it's almost a year and a half ago now, seems like, they voted on BRT, or Bus Rapid Transit, as their preferred alternate on State Route 400 corridor. So we've been working with MARTA and the Fulton County to incorporate Bus Rapid Transit in our express lanes that we're proposing on State Route 400. And then also just this year, started last year with phase 1, but the mayors on the top end from Smyrna all the way to Tucker got together and did a study and said, guys, we need to figure out rapid transit. What does transit look like for us as well? So they are moving forward with phase 2 of that study with the intent to put some sort of rapid transit within the corridor of 285 top end that works and is integrated within the express lanes. What that looks like is yet to be determined. They're doing a study to get to that point. But there is an effort and a coordination effort between us and the counties and the mayors and all these cities on the corridor to find that integrated approach. Talk about some of the benefits of express lanes. Hopefully you guys have had a chance to ride in the existing express lanes that we have open today. You'll see reliable travel times. You guys, you get into the system, you get to the destination that you choose to get to at a consistent time. You know what to expect when it comes to travel times. More consistent travel speeds. You don't get on a roadway that's heavily congested and go 55 miles per hour and then slow down to 20. Those roadways, the express lanes are giving you those reliable travel speeds in the corridor. One thing that is often lost, though, when it comes to express lanes is there's huge transit service benefits in the express lanes. For example, if you choose to get out of your car and get into a transit service provider without express lanes, you're going to be sitting in the same traffic that everybody else is and not going anywhere. So there's really no incentive for anyone to get out of their car and get into a transit service provider when they're going to sit in congestion like everyone else. And if you're in the bus, you don't have the option to get off and find these side streets to find the best way to get to where you need to go. So you're really stuck. So really the incentive's not there. Since we've opened express lanes, the transit service providers are allowed to get into the system for free. So they don't have to pay to get into the system. You still have to pay to get into the service of the transit, but you don't have to pay a second charge. And we're finding that the transit service providers are getting reliable trip times. Those destinations they're getting to a lot of times quicker than they used to, so they're having to adjust their schedules because people are used to a certain time and they're getting there faster. So huge benefits when it comes to transit service providers on the express lanes, and that's what we're hearing from them as well. Some statistics, as I mentioned, we opened Northwest Corridor express lanes last year in October. That's a reversible system, which means it's 2 lanes inbound in the morning, and outbound in the afternoon 2 lanes, and it switches in the middle of the day. We close the system, they switch the direction. We've seen rush hour on the I-75 corridor reduced by over an hour, both in the morning and the afternoon. And when I say rush hour, I've said this to everyone in these meetings, it's not rush hour, it's rush 5.5 hours. That's what we have in our most congested corridors, about 5.5 hours of rush hour, both morning and afternoon. So when you can drop a rush hour by more than an hour, that's quite a significant improvement that we're seeing with express lanes. Over 4.2 million trips in the corridor so far. Travel speeds are up 30% greater than the GP lanes, the general purpose lanes, if you're in the express lanes. So really reliable trip times. Folks are going well above the posted speed limit in there, I think, as well. The average daily rate is about $1.70. I think that's trending up a little bit now. I'm hearing from CERTA, who operates the facility. The most they've posted it at most recently was about $5 from end to end. And that's getting in at 285, going all the way to Sixes Road on 575. So quite a long way for a low rate to get that reliable trip time. Folks are really excited about the use of that express lane. We're hearing social media comments. Guys, I'm saving 20, 30 minutes or more, whatever that number is on my commute. I can get to my kids' ball game. I can get to their recital, whatever it may be. They really love the express lanes. But what we did not anticipate after opening the express lanes was we're getting a lot of benefit in the general purpose lanes as well. Speeds are up in the general purpose lanes by 20 miles per hour. Folks were sitting 10, 15 miles per hour. They're seeing a lot faster travel speeds in the general purpose lanes. So everyone in the express lanes is getting a benefit. Well, we're also seeing it in the general purpose lanes. So you can imagine that type of concept on the top end 285 corridor with express lanes. We're going to see, I think, the same thing based on the results here. So Major Mobility Investment Program, I mentioned earlier that the program as a whole is going to move the needle when it comes to mobility and congestion in the region. This is a regional program, not just a local program. We're doing more than just express lanes. We're putting express lanes on 285, as I mentioned already, and Upstate Route 400, but we're also improving some interchanges at 285 and 20 on both the east and west side, and those are not going to be managed or tolled. So those are important projects that are heavily congested. These are major freight corridors, freight interchanges, so we got to make sure that we can get that freight through there, because as they deepen the harbor down in Savannah, a lot more freight is going to come out of the harbor, and we need to accommodate that. So we're also doing a couple projects down in Savannah for that very reason as well. Outreach, not just this meeting, but we've been very proactive. Our team is out talking to as many stakeholders as we can, up to including HOAs, Rotary clubs, cities, counties, CIDs, schools, and anyone and everyone we can to help inform them and educate them on what this program is, what these projects are, but more importantly, what are the timelines for the projects, what can you expect, and where can you give us the feedback we need to make the best decision we can on all these projects. So we are very active. What you see on the screen is some icons of the stakeholders that we visited, often 4 or 5 or more times, whatever is necessary to get that information out and answer those questions they have in these corridors. So focusing in on the top end 285 corridor, so the limits of this project goes from roughly Paces Ferry Road on the west side, 1 lane all the way up to 75 in each direction. It switches from 1 lane to 2 lanes in each direction from I-75 to I-85, and it goes back down to 1 lane from 85 to Henderson Road. Now, we eventually carry that one express lane all the way down to 20 on both the east and west side, but those are different projects. We have a short section of this top-end project that goes up State Route 400 to the MARTA station, and from the MARTA station of North Springs all the way to McFarland is the State Route 400 express lane project. So what you'll see is a complete connected express lane system network that's going to talk to one another so folks can get in any given location and get through this network with a reliable trip time and travel speeds. So what are the next steps? We're going to issue the notice of intent in October of this year, which is going to kick off the environmental document for the project. So there's a lot of objectives we're trying to achieve with both the program and the project as a whole. Obviously, we want to be creative and create efficient design. We wanted to avoid. If we can avoid any property out there, that's our number one goal. And if we can't avoid, we're going to try to minimize. And if we can't minimize, we're going to try to mitigate. 285 corridor is very densely populated when it comes to commercial and residential units on both the north and south side. And guess what? There's new development popping up almost every day and a lot of redevelopment. So we've got to try to stay ahead of that, making sure that we design a system that avoids where possible, but try to accommodate what's happening out there as well. But one of the important things that we're finding out of the express lane system is that we believe it's a catalyst for that future integrated approach when it comes to transit and express lanes. And as we move forward, we're going to provide these multimodal options when it comes to express lanes and transit. And one way we're doing that, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to work with our partners of ATL, that umbrella agency that's getting a planning effort together to talk to all these transit service providers to create that long-term plan and come up with a plan on integrating themselves with the express lanes to bring that integrated approach to solving mobility and congestion on these corridors. We're also going to work with CERTA. They're a key partner when it comes to express lanes. GDOT builds the projects. CERTA actually operates the express lanes once they're open to traffic. They set the toll rates based on the demand or the amount of cars in the corridor, and they actually take the customer service calls for the express lanes as well. So those folks are our key partner when it comes to the express lane projects. The timeline for the top-end express lane project, we've been doing a lot of early initial concept work or environmental work, just some initial studies, just to see what we need to move forward with. The next point on this project is rescind the Revive NOI in the summer of this year, issue the new one in October. And in January of next year, we're going to actually have our first public information open house meetings. That's where we're going to have come in a room like this, and you're going to have layouts around the room where you can go up and see exactly what the concept at that time looks like. And more importantly, to give you the chance to ask questions and give us that feedback based on what you see. None of those decisions are final, and none of the decisions are final until we get a final environmental document and all those decisions have been vetted. But along the way, you're going to have multiple opportunities to have public meetings to get that feedback as we move that project through the process. Ultimately, getting to construction around 2023 and getting that project built and open to traffic several years after that. So milestones I mentioned, the public information open house in January, that's where you're going to learn about more in detail about the environmental process, the concept layout as we know it then. You're going to learn more about the transit coordination that we're ongoing right now with regards to the integrated approach in that regard. You'll look at what we believe right-of-way needs are going to be. And in some cases, we may need no right-of-way. In some cases, we may need 2 feet or 5 feet or 10 feet. In some cases, we may need the whole property. We just don't know yet. As we look and study and make the decisions based on what we're seeing, we're going to try to, again, avoid first and otherwise minimize to that extent. And then we'll also show you what the baseline access points are going to look like for the express lanes. There's going to be no express lane access points at existing interchanges. That's really important. The interchanges that are out there are staying as they are on this corridor, and any new express lane access will be a new interchange proposed, and you'll see that in January. And one key element to the express lanes that's often forgotten is no trucks are allowed in the express lanes. There's lots of reasons for that, but no tractor trailers are allowed in the express lanes either. Thank you, guys.